Welcome to another episode of the Supply Chain Chat. Today I am joined by Tyler Deutsch, Senior Vice President at Produce Alliance, who oversees business development. Welcome, Tyler. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks so much, Melissa. Pleasure to be here.
Great. Today we're going to be talking about the produce supply chain. There is so much disruption in the supply chain right now. How much of that disruption has to do with the pandemic and how much has to do with regular produce challenges?
With the pandemic in produce, it had a lot of different phases throughout its existence. A lot of it was not knowing exactly what to put into the ground when the pandemic started. There was a lot of closures in the restaurant space, as we know. Supply went out, demand went out the door, and really that kind of just put a kind of a question mark as far as how much product to bring into distribution centers, how much product to deliver, etc. So there was a phase where it started with the growers not knowing how much to plant for the new upcoming season, and then it came into how much to bring in and how much to actually store and have ready for our customers. So as we kind of started, we had to learn those type of dynamics, and then as the pandemic kind of changed and evolved, and the whole system kind of changed, we were able to kind of figure out those challenges, how to maneuver through those waters, and really get a better sense of supply and demand.
Yeah, no, I think that with restaurants having to go through that, they definitely had to pivot pretty quickly when the pandemic first started. And I feel like a lot more recently, we've been seeing a lot of value-added fresh produce, a lot of grab-and-go items at restaurants and hotels and food pantries. So that I truly believe that coming out of the pandemic, I think, yeah, it might have been a struggle and they had to pivot, but I think a lot of great ideas came from it as well.
I agree. I think a big part is when the pandemic occurred, you kind of took it. You kind of forgot how available and how not available certain items were. So I think people started to appreciate, getting grab and go fresh snacks or a fruit plate or something like that. Whereas, when that stuff's not getting produced or there's no demand for it and that stuff's not on the shelves, there's definitely a pent-up demand for it that now people are appreciating, and I think people want to see that on their menus or want to see that as they go through an airport or wherever that may be, where they want to see those grab-and-go items. Definitely.
Yeah, definitely. As we come out of the pandemic and we kind of go into April and springtime, the growing season is unfolding and we're approaching the next produce field transition time. What does that impact look like for local growing, and how does it impact local growing and overall produce commodities?
Yeah, so when the transitions occur, which is always the same time every year, and we always hope for a good season going in and going out of each transition. There's also if we get into the springtime and the summer, local operations, local growing is always going to play a big role. It's something that people look forward to. It's a big thing for restaurants to be able to push local where possible. We work with chains all across the country that love to tell people where their tomatoes are come locally or where they can pull local lettuce or whatnot. So local growing is stronger than ever and will continue to be a huge force in the produce industry. And as we continue to transition from our big growing regions throughout the year, you're going to continue to see a demand for where we can find local growing and how that'll play into the market.
Okay, great. Speaking of transition, it involves an incredible amount of planning, and it comes with tremendous costs, including field crews, trucks, equipment, transportation costs. Why do growers go through all this trouble, and how are produce markets impacted by the transition?
Absolutely. There's two big growing cycles throughout the year. It's the November to April when you are in Yuma, and then in April to November when you are in the Salinas, California region. So you can think of it as two growing cycles where your lettuces, all your kind of your West Coast vegetables, literally move from one climate to the other. And so these growers have to basically pick up their equipment and literally in a 2 days, 2 day max time frame, move that equipment from Salinas, California, all the way down to Yuma, Arizona, and back. Now, it's changed throughout the years, and growers have become very sophisticated in how they do this process, as they're used to it, doing it twice a year. So many of them now have facilities in both Salinas and Yuma that have equipment in both. So for those growers that have the luxury of doing that, they don't have to maneuver so much, but they do have to. But personnel is still important and still a transition. A lot of the people that work in the Salinas, California growing area move down to Yuma and back and forth. So if it's not equipment, it's definitely people and that whole process. But there is still some growers, and I say a good amount of them, that do haul all their equipment from one facility in Salinas down to their plant in Yuma, Arizona, and then back and forth. And it is an unbelievable process to see, because it is like putting together a jigsaw puzzle and then putting it all back together again, and putting it on a truck, hauling it down, and then putting it all back. And really, they have to do it in a time frame because the demand doesn't stop, Melissa. They're still getting purchase orders. Product still needs to be placed. They can't be disruption as much as we like the disruption, but they don't want too much disruption in the supply chain. So they have about 2 days probably that they do over the weekend to get this product or get these equipments and people from one place to the other. So it's an incredible process, and it is it's. I think every year we're more and more sophisticated, but there's unforeseen challenges that always occur. But I think it's about communication and about letting our customers know when it's happening.
I can't believe all that's done in just a couple days.
Yeah, it really is. I think it's 2-3 days max. They pack it up in the trucks and they go down. It's an unbelievable process. Some of the growers actually have great videos of how they break down a facility and then they pack it up into the trucks, these long haul trucks, and they bring it down. So I encourage anybody who's listening to watch some of these growers do that. It's pretty fascinating. Incredible what they do.
Great. What produce is included in the transition? Is it all fresh produce or just specific items?
It's a lot of your leafy greens, it's your lettuces, it's your broccoli, it's most of your kind of like we call it your salad bowl country. So it's mostly your lettuces, your broccoli, your cabbages, things like that. So those are the things that typically you get from the California and Arizona region, and those are the big Salinas to Yuma transitions that happen twice a year.
Okay. You mentioned cabbage, and I was actually reading an article the other day that says an upcoming trending menu item is going to be cabbage, which makes sense because that's a pretty popular menu item during St. Patrick's Day. When these produce items like cabbage become popular, how much of that trend is dictated by growers and shippers, and how much is dictated just by time of year or a holiday that's approaching?
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely, I think there's probably two sides to that. When there's a new item that people love, or not even that. I mean, you mentioned cabbage, but like kale, right? That was an item that was once just a garnish, and now you can't get enough of it, and they grow all different types of kale. Well, cabbage is the same way. It's a hardy item. It's obviously used for coleslaw and other mixes, and a grower will push certain items into the marketplace, and they'll use the distribution and marketing and social media and so forth to push items out there. but it really is also, allowing our restaurant and our food service industry know the trends that are occurring with these items, what kind of culinary innovations can occur with these items as well, and what they can do, and what's available. So you might like cabbage during St. Patrick's Day, or different types of kale now that you can use for salads and blends and all sorts of good stuff. You can now pretty much the end user can now kind of dictate a trend, and then the grower as well, and it follows either way. Sometimes the grower will push it first, but then there will be end users, or people in the social media platform that push stuff, and then the growers will follow. So it's kind of both sides. Kind of interesting.
Great. We're talking about fresh produce, and food safety and fresh produce is so important. How can a managed produce program help operators stay on top of food safety?
Yeah, you hit a very big point there. Food safety, predominantly, is one of the biggest, if not biggest, attributes to having a produce, actually a nationwide produce program. There were years and years where a restaurant chain, or a group, or just a chef would kind of buy produce from wherever it was growing, from local jobbers to just friends down the street to anywhere, and you didn't know where that product was where, you didn't know from a consumer standpoint where that product was coming from and how it was operated. So basically, and the industry has gotten smarter, and we still have ways to go, but we're getting there. Food safety now is so important about tracking labels, tracking, knowing where it is in the marketplace, where it is in transportation, and knowing where that product is coming from a distribution level to where it was actually delivered to a store level. A strong produce program can really trace stuff all the way back to the field, and know where and when things were picked, and when it was harvested, and when it was transported. So you can't really get that unless you have a strong, traceable program that allows you to do that. And you can't really do that without a pretty much a very sophisticated produce supply chain, under your belt. So it's more important than ever. As you know, there's been recalls and market withdrawals over the last several years on lettuces and other things, and it's people that had produce programs in place and strong food safety that did well during that time, even though it was a stressful time regardless. But if you don't have a strong food safety emphasis in your produce purchasing, you're definitely kind of behind the curve.
Right. What is the key data point that you look at as a produce expert to determine the overall health of the produce commodity market?
It's you say this a lot with anything, but like supply and demand is big. You want to be able to see that product is readily available. That product is the quality and demand. The quality of product is there, and then also that there's kind of like an equilibrium between supply and demand, and between consumers wanting that product versus just kind of the standard product that you see on the ground, or you see in stores and offered in restaurants. You want to be able to kind of see a lot of different statistic points to kind of follow and make sure that you have a viable product that you can see throughout the whole supply chain. So there's a lot of different fundamental points that we see that is a good market or a bad market, but we want to be able to kind of see a produce commodity as something that's very viable and can kind of be looked at throughout the year.
Being like a normal customer who goes to restaurants all the time and orders food, I never knew there was so much that went into the fresh produce process and traceability. And I have just learned so much during this conversation from you.
No problem. It's amazing what it takes to get some leafy greens and some toppings and a side of sliced avocado to a plate. It's unbelievable, but it's a great story, and you have to appreciate everybody that touches that product throughout the supply chain.
Right. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to chat with us today about fresh produce and transition and commodity markets and trends. I can't thank you enough. I've learned so much and I appreciate the time.
Thank you, Melissa. Anytime. Appreciate it so much.